sometimes people have what it takes, but they haven't recognized it yet. Just go forward.
So what do you
Welcome and hello, everybody. My name is Andrew David.
What you need to do is be that person that's different
and it's bigger than you think.
Friday,
Rise from the ashes and fly like.
So I want to talk to you. Actually, we were kicking off right before I started recording, talking a little bit about joints and this and that, and health is one of those topics that I've come back to a number of times, and there's a reason for it. Sometimes people say, what does this have to do with my mindset? What does this have to do with, being successful with my funnel? Like most of us, I think, looking at who's on right now, Mate is probably the youngest by a month or two, I'm going to guess. But as we grow older, as we deal with things in life, not only do we grow wiser, but there are other obstacles that occasionally we have to confront. And sometimes those obstacles play a little role in how we deal with even our online business. Now, health has become, it was always an interesting thing to me when I grew up. My dad was one of those guys that would read muscle and fitness magazines and flex magazines. Those were, back in the 90s when bodybuilding was growing. I think it was probably in kind of like its heyday. And if you're unfamiliar with those magazines, those are the ones where when Arnold Schwarzenegger was in his prime and all of those guys that were larger than life in a big way, like those magazines, like how to, make your chest grow this, how to get biceps that look like basketball, like it was that kind of thing. Right. And it was always funny to me, as a kid, it took me a little while to realize, Arnold, Lou Ferrigno, and then Lee Haney and Flex Wheeler and all of these guys. Took me a little bit before I realized that, hey, the protein powders that they're selling and the supplements that they're selling may be great, but that ain't what's getting those guys to look like that. There was, some pharmaceutical enhancements that were going on as well. And as a kid, I didn't really realize that. But fitness became important to me at that age, really, because as a kid, I was kind of the chubby kid. My freshman year, my sophomore year, when we would go play basketball and there was shirts and skins, there was always one team I made sure that I was on, right? And it was the team that was covered up. That was the way I wanted to go, right? I didn't want to be a part of the other team. I was embarrassed about it. I felt like I was kind of built a little bit like a pear. My shoulders weren't as wide as I felt like I had good childbearing hips as a young teenage boy. And so I wasn't super comfortable with it, even though I, played sports and was trying to be athletic. It just wasn't the same thing. Right. And so anyway, I started working out. My sophomore year is kind of when things got serious. And my focus was, I didn't care how much I was benching or squatting. I was doing all of the exercises you need to do, but I started to do it so that my shoulders were wider than my hips. Like that was my goal as a kid. That was the first and only thing that I really cared of. And then over time, it became a bigger part of my life. Now it really pushed in that direction when I've mentioned this before. I was 21 when my dad passed away. We're coming up on, in a couple of months here, we'll hit the 21 year anniversary. Like it's been a while, but my dad was 21 when he passed. And so health kind of became a bigger thing for me for a while. And you kind of value life a little bit more. Then in my 30s, working, doing cleaning and restoration and traveling and doing everything I was doing and putting in 80 hours and 100 hours and 120 hours in a week and just working myself to the bone and realizing there was more to life than just the strength that I had in my back and in my arms, that I should have been capable of more. And then I started to stack on top of that stress. I went through divorce. Stress, all of you guys should understand really well, can affect you quite significantly physically, right? It can wreak havoc on what you're doing. And when you don't pay attention to that stress, and then you're not listening to your body because you're in a constant state of just kind of pain and fatigue and frustration, and mentally you're just not putting anything into it. If you don't listen to your body, things happen. So I was in my mid 30s and ended up kind of tweaking my upper back. And then I'm driving around to all these different jobs and doing all of this extra work and lifting heavy things that I shouldn't be lifting. And my back started to hurt a little bit more. And I wasn't stretching. Yoga was definitely not anything I was doing. I wasn't working out really. I was eating poorly. And got to the point where I was going into meetings, and to get out of a chair, I had to kind of roll myself forward and slowly get up. And it could take as much as 60 seconds before I could stand vertically, right? Like my back was hurting that bad. I wasn't sleeping. It was my sciatica. It was this, it was that. I went to the doctor, and they said, oh no, it's just, you got to stretch a little bit. And, I was just short of getting an MRI, tried chiropractor. I was going to a chiropractor weekly. I was trying to do massages all of the time. It was not good. And it was pushing me mentally, creating even more stress. That additional stress was creating more physical manifestations of that stress. And so everything was just kind of spinning. And some of you may be familiar with that. And maybe you got to that point where you had a pain of one or a sickness that was debilitating. And maybe you didn't. Maybe you feel little tweaks here and there. Now, chiropractic, and it got enough to where I was just full transparency. I had a buddy that had really bad pain and really bad back pain. And he had a prescription for something. And he let me have some once in a while when I couldn't really stand it. And it's not something I'm super proud of, but the scariest part to me was that it barely affected, it didn't even do that much. Here's this drug, because it's exactly what it was, right? That was prescribed for people with severe pain. And a lot of people would become addicted to this particular drug. And I was trying to take it here and there and not feeling any effect at all. Just wasn't doing anything. Occasionally it might help me get through a few hours, but that was about it. And I went, I can't live like this. I'm not going to go try and get a lot more to help balance things. This isn't working. That's not working. What can I do? And I ended up, so I changed chiropractors. I went through 4 or 5 different chiropractors, trying everything. I went to one, and what they did is they put the TENS units, like the electric pulse units, right? So they put some of that, they iced me down. They put the TENS unit on. I was crying in pain as my muscles were spasming. And then they adjusted me and then said, you need to go get a massage right now. Go follow this up, go get a massage. So I did. And I felt a sense of relief, at least for a little while. And then it came back. And so I tried it again and felt that little bit. And it was about the only time during a year where I had felt any relief. And so what I ended up doing is I got a TENS unit for myself. And I tried it for a little bit, 15, 20 minutes here and there. And I would feel a little bit of relief. And it still wasn't working enough, because what would happen is after the muscles had gone through that, your muscles tend to curl back into where they're accustomed to being. If you're not stretching, if you're not doing anything, right? The whole purpose of stretching in yoga, the whole purpose of the TENS unit is to kind of fatigue the muscle to the point where it stretches itself out. Now, what you want to do at that point is allow your skeleton to get where it should, and the muscles to kind of resituate themselves so they go, okay, now we can rest. Because what was happening is where the sciatica was, that muscle, my gluteus maximus and everything else, was wrapped around that nerve like this. And then this side of my back, that muscle was stretched out. So everything was just in pain. So what did I do? I took that TENS unit and I turned it on and I left it on for about 48 hours, just all day, to the point where the muscles weren't twitching anymore. I laid around. I tried not to move too much. And then I went to the chiropractor, and then I went to a massage. And I did that for a little bit. And my body kind of reset itself in a way that I never imagined. It was bonkers. But after a year plus of trying to do all these different things, eventually my body kind of reset itself. And it was an awakening moment for me, because it allowed me to kind of reset my path, recognize how far I'd allowed myself to stumble, because it was errors on my part. I wasn't stretching. I wasn't bending at the waist the way I need, at the knees the way I needed to. I was doing silly things. And what I needed to do is pay more attention to those little moments. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got little physical triggers, mental triggers, social triggers, emotional triggers. You've got something that's going on in your life you need to pay more attention to. Now, what you can do is kind of look at it and say, you know what, I'm going to set up for myself kind of this self-control systems. And so you can call it what you want. I've kind of created some systems for myself so that I can recognize when I'm starting to descend in any way, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I've got routines to reset. But even with those reset routines, I do things to maintain, right? To try and do as much as I can to maintain a certain level of optimum health. I just had last week, I had some blood work done. I do it now every year to kind of see where I'm at from cholesterol to hormones and everything else. I'm in better shape now than I was a few years ago, than I was 2 years ago, which is great because as I get older, if even my blood work looks better, that means, and Tony Robbins' new book that we're going to end up talking about, and I don't think Scott's on here, but it's on that book list. But he kind of talks about this too, guys, biohacking, life hacking, all of these different things. You can set up systems to improve your health no matter how old you are, or at least slow down significantly, the pathway that inevitably we pass with time. For me, some of those systems have, I still have that TENS unit. So if I need to, there you go. Life Force. Is that what it is? Michael's got it right there. Life Force, big, thick book, pretty cool reading. We are going to end up talking about it. We'll probably do that this next week because my fiance's got the copy, so I need to read through it. But we'll dive into that. We'll talk a little bit more about this. But guys, I want you to pay attention to where you're at right now. If you got those aches and pains physically, if mentally and emotionally, if you got something that's just kind of digging at you, you may recognize it because you're a little bit more on edge. You're not sleeping the way you need to. Something's going on. Pay attention to those and figure out what you need to do to reset. And sometimes it may be extreme. And I'm not talking about for me, what I'm saying is that extreme, the TENS unit, chiropractor, massage, that cycle allowed me to reset. And now, maybe I do need to do yoga as I get older, but I stretch, I do what I need to, right? Like I'm making sure, and I know some of you guys are big proponents. I'm not in any way saying you shouldn't. You should. I know I should, but I make sure that I do stretch enough, right? So that I'm not going that same way, right? I recognize it. And the more you pay attention to your body, the more you'll pick up those triggers. I start to know when I'm going to feel back pain, when I feel my hamstrings and the tendons in my knees start tightening up because I haven't stretched enough. Right. And that's what we don't pay attention to. I go, man, my calves are really tight from Stairmaster and extra sprinting that I've been doing. I better stretch those so I don't end up with back pain. Right. Like you got to start connecting all of it. And it may be, my shoulders, my upper back have just been, really hurting. Well, maybe it's because you're carrying too much stress as you sit down and you're working on your funnel. Right. Pay attention to everything, guys, because it's all interconnected. Because if I'm carrying that stress and that frustration physically, then it's going to affect my business. It's going to affect my relationship. It affects everything. If you want longevity is great. Longevity that you can enjoy is a hell of a lot better. And that's what I want you guys to be able to do. So spend a few minutes today, kind of look at what's going on physically, mentally, emotionally. What are your triggers? We'll talk a little bit about how to identify specifically your own triggers tomorrow and how to work out around creating systems to help you with that. So you can keep yourself on the right pathway. Do I use a mouse? Sometimes I use a mouse. Sometimes I use my screen. It is a touch screen as well. Yeah. An ergonomic one. No, I need to get one that's a little better. I also, and I've mentioned I'm going to get a standing desk as well. The biggest reasons I haven't gotten the standing desk is because I like my desk, but I would have to move this so I could put the standing desk because I've got my window and it's just good lighting. Makes my skin look better. But anyway, guys, pay attention to yourselves, to your bodies. I want you guys, as much as I want you, launching and happy and rocking with the business.
Sometimes people have what it takes, but they have to
wrap this call.
Just go forward. So what do you need to do? How do you stand out?
What you need to do is be that person that's different.
And it's bigger than you think.
So let's
Rise from the ashes.